for another country, and today we're on Portugal. So yeah, here we go, starting off with the history as usual. There was a Iberian Peninsula has been inhabited for at least 30,000 years. And it's some of the evidence is near. There's Paleolithic inscriptions near Villa Nova de Boscar on the Alto Douro, and there's new weather ghosts, atmospheric fortified hilltop settlements dating from 5500 BC in the lower Tejo or Tagus Valley. And in the first millennia BC, Celtic people started trickling into the Iberian Peninsula, settling northern and western Portugal from around 700 BC, and dozens of citadels, or fortified villages popped up such as the formidable Citania de Bitarius. Sorry if I botched anything. Further south, Phoenician traders, followed by Greek and Carthaginian, founded coastal stations and mined metals further inland. And when the Romans swept into southern Portugal in 210 BC, they expected an easy victory, but hadn't reckoned on the Lusitani, a Celtic warrior tribe based in between the Rio Tejo and Rio Douro, who were restricted ferociously. That went on for half a century. Unable to subjugate the Lusitani, the Romans offered peace instead and began negotiations with Aito, a Lusitanian leader. Unfortunately for Viriteo and his underlings, the peace offer was somewhat of a ruse, and Roman agents posing as intermediaries poisoned him, and resistance collapsed following his death in 139 BC. In 19 BC, the Romans had eliminated all traces of Lusitanian independence, and a capital was established at Alicipo, now Lisbon, in 60 BC, and Christianity became firmly rooted in Portugal during the 3rd century AD. From a vivid glimpse of Rome and Portugal, you can go to places like Coimbra near Coimbra, or the monumental remains of the circle Temple of Diana in Evora. And in the 5th century, when the Roman Empire had collapsed, Portugal's inhabitants had been under Roman rule for 600 years by that time, and the Romans had left the roads and bridges and all that, and they kept the wheat, barley, olives and vines, and large farming estates called latifundios, still found now an illegal system and a Latin derived language in The gap left by the Romans was filled by invaders from the Pyrenees, Vandals, Alans, Visigoths, and Suevi, the Arian Christian Visigoths. Gained a hand in 469, and internal Visigoth disputes paved the way for Portugal's next wave of invaders, the Moors, North African Muslims, invited in 711 to help the Visigothic faction, and they quickly occupied large chunks of Portugal's southern coast. As southerners enjoyed peace and productivity under the Moors, and who established a castle at Silves, new rulers were tolerant of Jewish and Christians, and Christian smallholding farmers called Mozarabs could keep their lands and were encouraged to try new methods and crops, especially citrus and rice, and Arabic words built into the Portuguese language, such as alface, lettuce, arroz, rice, and dozens of place names including Fatima, Silves, and Algarve. And with a letter stemming from the Arabic Algarve, now meaning the west, including, and Lycos became addicted to Moorish sweets and all that. Meanwhile, in North, Christian forces were gaining strength and reached as far as Porto in 868, but in the 11th century that the Christian reconquest really began, and in 1064 Coimbra was taken, and in 1085 Alfonso VI beat back the Moors in the Spanish heartland of Toledo, and he said to have secured Seville by winning a chess game with the emir. But in the following year, Alfonso's men were driven out by Moroccan Almoravids who answered to the emir's distress call, and Alfonso cried for help, and the European Crusaders came coming and rallying against the infidels, and with Henry of Burgundy among others, Alfonso made decisive moves towards victory, and the struggle continued in successive generations, and by 1139 Alfonso Henriques, grandson of Alfonso VI, won a dramatic victory against the Moors at Alentejo, and named himself Dom, King of Portugal, a title confirmed in 1179 by the Pope, and after extra tribute was paid naturally, and he also took Santarém and Lisbon from the Moors. And by the time he died in 1185, the Portuguese frontier was secured to the Rio Tejo, which would take another century for the south to be torn from the Moors. And in 1297, with the boundaries in the Portuguese kingdom much of the same, in roughly the same way as they are today, were formalised with a neighbouring Castile, and the Kingdom of Portugal was made. And during the Reconquista, people faced more in turmoil in the wake of the Christian victories, and became new rulers and settlers, and the church was and its wealthy clergy were greedy landowners, followed by cats and all, aristocrats and all that. And for theoretically free, the most common people renamed subjects of the landowning class with few rights. The first hints of democratic rule came with the establishment of a Cortes, or Parliament, and the Assembly of Nobles and Clergy first met in 1211 at Coimbra, the then capital, and 6 years later the capital moved to Lisbon. And Alfonso I, from 1248 to 79, stood up to the church, but it was his son, the poet, King Dinis, 1279 to 1325. Those 2 dates I just said, 1248 to 79, 1279 to 1325 are likely reigning dates. He really took Portugal into shape like a far-sighted, cultured man. He took control of trade, of the judicial system, and started a progressive afforestation programs that encouraged internal trade, and he suppressed the dangerously powerful military order of the Knights Templar, refounding them as the Order of Christ, and he cultivated music, the arts and education, and founding the University of Lisbon in 1290, which was later transferred to Coimbra. And Dom Denis, his foresight was spots when it came to defence, when he rebuilt some 50 fortresses along the eastern frontier with Castile and signed a pact of friendship with England in 1308, and which was the basis for a future long-lasting alliance. And within 60 years of his death, Portugal was at war with Castile, and as Fernando I helped provoke a clash by playing a game of alliances with both Castile and the English, and dangled promises of marriage to his daughter Beatrice in front of both nations, eventually marrying her off to Joan I of Castile, and was throwing Portugal's hand into Castilian hands. And upon Fernando's death in 1383, his wife Leonor ruled as regent, but she was entangled with the Spanish, having long had a Gallican lover, and the merchant classes preferred unsullied Portuguese candidate João, or Albert, son, and it's the illegitimate son of Fernando's father, João, assassinated Leonor's lover, and Leonor fled to Castile, and the Castilians invaded. The showdown came in 1385 when João forced a mighty force of Castilians at Aljubarrota, and even with Nuno Alvares Pereira, the Holy Constable, and his military right-hand man and English archers at the ready, the odds were stacked against him as João vowed to build a monastery if he won, and he did. As Nuno Alvares, the commander-in-chief of the Portuguese troops, can deserve much of the credit for the victory, as he lured Spanish cavalry into the trap, and with an uphill advantage his troop decimated the invaders, and with a few hours the Spanish were retreating in disarray, and the battle was won. As the victory cliched independence, and João made good his vow with Batalhas, stunning Mosteiro de Santa Maria de Vitória, aka the Mosteiro de Batalha, now Bacalhau Abbey, and also sealed Portugal's alliance with England when João wed Joan of Gaunt's daughter, and peace was finally concluded in 1411. As João, in the success, had whetted his appetite and spurred on by his sons, he soon turned his military energies abroad, and Morocco was an obvious target, and in 1415 Ceuta fell easily to his forces, and it was a turning point in Portuguese history as it turned his first steps for a golden age. And it was João's third son, Henry, focused on the spirit of the age, and with a combination of a crusading zeal and love of martial glory and lust for gold, into extraordinary exploitations across the sea. And these explorations were the transformed a small kingdom into an imperial power. And the biggest breakthrough came in 1497 during the reign of Manuel I, when Vasco da Gama reached southern India with gold and slaves from Africa and spices from the east. Portugal was soon rolling in riches, and Manuel I was so thrilled by discoveries and resultant cash injection, it was ordered a frenzied building spree in celebration. Top of his list was the extravagant Mosteiro dos Jerónimos in Belém, later became his pantheon, and another brief boost to the Portuguese economy. At the time came courtesy of an influx of around 150,000 financially savvy Jews expelled from Spain in 1492. But Spain had jumped into the explanation thing as well, and soon disputing Portuguese claims, as Christopher Columbus So his 1492 discovery of Americas for Spain led a fresh outburst of jealous conflict, and it was resolved by the Pope in a resolve in like a 1494 Treaty of Tordesillas, by which the world was divided between two great powers along the line 370 leagues west of Cape Verde Islands. Portugal won the lands east of the line, including Brazil, officially claimed in 1500, and rivalry spurred the first circumnavigation of the world, and in 1519 Portuguese navigator Fernando Magalhães Fernando Magellan and his allegiance transferred to Spain after a tiff with Manuel I, set off in an effort to prove that the Spice Islands, today Moluccas, lay in Spanish territory. He reached the Philippines in 1521, but was killed in a skirmish there, and one of his 5 ships under the Basque navigator Joan Sebastian Elcano reached the Spice Islands, and then sailed home via the Cape of Good Hope, proving the Earth was round. As its explorers reached Timor, China, and eventually Japan, Portugal cemented its power with garrisons, ports, and trading posts. The monarchy, taking its royal fifth of profits, became rich indeed, and one of the wealthiest monarchs in Europe, and the lavish Manueline architectural style symbolised exuberance of the arts, but couldn't last. And by the 1570s, the huge cost of expeditions and maintaining an empire was taking its toll, and the expulsion of commercially mining refugee Spanish Jews in 1496 and the subsequent persecution of converted Jews, known as Marianos or New Christians, during the Inquisition, which began in the 16th century under João III, was only worsened by the financial situation. And the final straw came in 1557 when an idealistic prince called Sebastião took the throne, determined to take Christianity to Morocco, and he rallied an 18,000 strong force and set sail from Lagos, only to be defeated at the Battle of Alcácer Quibir, and Sebastião and 8,000 others were killed, including much of the Portuguese nobility, and his successor, Cardinal Henrique, drained the royal coffers, ransoming those captured. On Henrique's death in 1580, Sebastião's uncle, Philip II of Spain, now Philip I of Portugal, fought and won the throne, and at the end of the centuries of independence and Portugal's golden age and its glorious moments of the world stage. Although Spanish rule began promisingly with Philip vowing to preserve Portugal's autonomy and to attend the long-ignored Parliament, but commoners resented Spanish rule and held on to a dream that Sebastião was still alive. But as some citizens were in denial as he was killed abroad in Morocco. Pretenders continued to swap until 1600. Though Philip was honourable, his successors proved to be considerably less so, to a certain extent, in using Portugal to raise money and soldiers for Spain's wars overseas, and inciting Spaniards to go into Portugal. And Portugal's empire was slipping out of their grasp, and in 1622 the English had seized Hormuz, and by the 1650s the Dutch had taken Malacca, Ceylon, known as Sri Lanka, and parts of Brazil. An uprising of the neighbouring Catalonia gave fuel to Portugal's independence drive, particularly when the Spanish King Felipe III ordered Portuguese troops to quell the uprising, and in 1614 a group of conspirators launched a coup, and the nationalists drove the female governess of Portugal and a Spanish garrison from Lisbon, and it was the Duke of Braganca reluctantly stepped forward and was crowned João IV. Another hostile Spain breathing down its neck, Portugal searched for allies, and swift treaties with England led to Charles II's marriage to João's daughter, Catherine of Braganca, and ceding Tangier and Bombay to England, and in return English promised arms and soldiers. However, a preoccupied Spain only made half-hearted attempts to recapture Portugal, and recognised Portugal's independence in 1668 and moves towards democracy, were installed by João's successor, and the crown hardly bothered with parliament, and in another area of prolific expenditure, following giving birth to projects like the wildly extravagant monetary palace in Mafra, and ensuing economic chaos of the 18th century. Set to mind of the moment, the Marquis de Pombal, chief minister of the Epicurean Dom José I, with Don José I, more interested in opera than affairs of state, described as an enlightened despot. Pombal dragged Portugal into the modern era, crushing opposition with what could be said as brutal efficiency. As Pombal set up state monopolies, curbed the power of British merchants, and boosted agriculture and industry. He abolished slavery and distinctions between traditional and new Christians, and overhauled education. And when Lisbon suffered a devastating earthquake in 1755, Pombal swiftly rebuilt the city and was then at the height of his power, and succeeded in dispensing with the main enemies by implicating them in an attempt on the king's life. And he might have continued but the devout ascension of the devout Donna Maria I in 1777. The anti-clerical Pombal was promptly sacked and tried and charged with various offences, though never imprisoned. While his religious legislation was repealed, his economic, agricultural and educational policies were largely maintained, helping the country back towards prosperity. But then a lovely man named Napoleon decided to come through Europe. As Portugal 1793, Portugal found itself at war again when it joined England and settled, sending naval forces against revolutionary France. And before long, Napoleon threw Portugal an ultimatum: close your ports to British shipping or be invaded. And there was no way for Portugal to turn its back on Britain, and depended for half of its trade and protection on its sea routes. And in 1807, Portugal's royal family fled to Brazil, where it stayed for 14 years, and Napoleon's forces marched into Lisbon, sweeping Portugal into the Peninsular War, which was France's invasion of Spain and Portugal, which lasted until 1814. And the rescue came with Sir Arthur Wellesley, later Duke of Wellington, Viscount Beresford, and seasoned British troops, who eventually drove the French back across the Spanish border in 1811. But weakened Portugal was administrated by Beresford, while the Royals were still in Brazil. And in 1810, Portugal lost a pivotal intermediary role by giving Britain the right to trade directly with Brazil. Next humiliation was João's 1815 proclamation of Brazil as a kingdom united with Portugal, and he did this to bring more wealth and prestige to Brazil, which he was growing to love, and in turn to him, the rest of the royal family residing there with soaring debts and a dismal trade. Portugal was once at a low point in its history, and is reduced to a de facto colony of Brazil and protectorate of Britain, and resentment simmered in the army as rebel officers quietly convened Parliament and drew up a new liberal constitution based on Enlightenment ideals. He abolished many rights of nobility and clergy and instituted a single chamber parliament. And in the face of a fight accompli, Joao returned and accepted its terms. His wife and son Miguel were bitterly opposed to it. Joao's eldest son Pedro had other ideas. Left behind to go in Brazil, he snubbed on the constitutionalists by declaring Brazil independence in 1822 and stated installed himself as emperor. And when Joao died in 1826, the stage was set for a civil war as offered the crown. Pedro dashed out a new, less liberal charter and then advocated in his favour of his 7-year-old daughter Maria, provided she married Uncle Miguel, and provided Uncle Miguel accepted the new constitution. Then Miguel took the oath but apparently abolished Pedro's charter and proclaimed himself king, and a livid Pedro rallied the equally furious liberals and forced Miguel to surrender at Vermonte in 1838. And after Pedro's death, his daughter Maria, now Queen of Portugal at 15, kept his flame alive with fanatical support of his 1826 charter. As a radical supporter of the liberal 1822 constitution grew vociferous over the next 2 decades, bringing the country to the brink of civil war. Duke of Saldanha, however, saved the day, negotiating a peace that toned down Pedro's charter while still radicalising. Yeah?
You may need to go and get some milk at some point if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I'd love to. Bringing the country to the brink of civil war, the Duke of Saldanha, however, saved the day, negotiating a peace that toned down Pedro's charter while still radically modernising Portugal's infrastructure. And the latter half of the 19th century was a remarkable period, for Portugal, and it became known as one of the most advanced societies in southern Europe. Casual visitors to Lisbon, like Hans Christian Andersen, were surprised to find tree-lined boulevards lined with gaslit street lamps, efficient trams and well-dressed residents. The social advances were less anecdotal, and the educational reformer Joao Arroyo dramatically increased the number of schools, doubling the number for boys' schools and quadrupling the number of girls' schools, and women gained the right to own property. Slavery was abolished throughout the Portuguese Empire, and as was the death penalty, and even the prison system received an overhaul, and prisoners were taught useful trades while in jail so they could integrate back into society upon their release in a useful kind of way. As professional organisations such as a literary guild emerged and became a major impetus in the advancement of ideas of a public discourse, inspiring debate in politics, religious life and the art world. And elsewhere in Europe, this was a good time for industrial growth, with a dramatic increase in textile production. Much of it was exported, and other major works included building of bridges and nationwide network of roads, as well as a flourishing major architectural works like the Pena Palace in Sintra. However, by 1900, the tides of discontent among the workers began growing. With increased mechanisation, workers began losing jobs, and factory owners began hiring children to operate the machines, and their demands for fair working conditions went unanswered, and those who went on strike were simplified and replaced. At the time, Portugal experienced a dramatic demographic shift as rural areas were increasingly depopulated in favour of large cities, and immigration, especially to Brazil, became larger. Much was changing, and more people began to look towards socialism as a cure for the country's inequalities. As nationalist republicanism swept through the lower middle classes, spurring by attempted coup in 1908, it failed, but but the following month Carlos and Crown Prince Luis Felipe were assassinated in Lisbon, and Carlos's younger son Manuel II tried feebly to appease Republicans, but it was a little too late. And on the 5th of October 1910, an uprising by military officers, a republic was declared, and Manuel dubbed the fortunate sailed into exile in Britain, where he died in 1932. And after a landslide victory in the 1911 elections, hopes were high among Republicans for dramatic changes ahead, but the tides were against him as the economy was in tatters, trained by the economically disastrous decision to join the Allies in World War I, and in post-war years the chaos deepened as Republican factions squabbled, and unions-led strikes were repressed, and the military grew more and more powerful. And a new republic soon had a reputation as Europe's most unstable regime. Between 1910 and 26, there was an astonishing 47 changes of government, going through a couple of years sailors, often resulting from military intervention, and in 1926 another coup took place and brought forth a new name on faces. Most significantly, Antonio de Oliveira Salazar, a finance minister who would rise up through the ranks to become prime minister, a post he would hold for the next 36 years. And Salazar hastily enforced his new state a corporate republic that was a nationalistic, Catholic, authoritarian, and was essentially repressive in some ways, as all political parties were banned except for the Loyalist National Union, which ran the show when the National Assembly strikes were banned and propaganda, censorship and brute force kept society in order, and since the new secret police, Policia Internacional de Defensa de Estado, PIDE, inspired terror and suppress opposition by imprisonment and torture. And various attempted coups during Salazar's rule were crucial. And yeah. And the only good news was a dramatic economic turnaround, and through the 1950s and 60s, Portugal experienced an annual industrial growth rate of 7 to 9%, and internationally, the Wily Salazar plays into like two hands, like unofficially supporting Franco's nationalists in the Spanish Civil War, and allowing British to use Azores airfields during World War II, despite officially being neutral and illegal sales of tungsten to Germany. And it was later discovered that Salazar also authorised transfers of Nazi looted gold to Portugal, about 44 tonnes according to some Allied records. But it was something else that finally brought the Salazarists' era to an end, which was decolonisation. As refusing to relinquish the colonies, he was faced with no more costly and unpopular military expeditions, and in 1962 Goa was occupied by India, and then nationalists rose up in Angola as guerrilla movements also appeared in Portuguese Guinea and Mozambique. But he didn't really face any of the consequences, as in 1968 he had a stroke and died 2 years later. So he had a good luck for having a stroke and dying. And his successor, Marcelo Caetano, failed to ease unrest, and military officers sympathetic to African freedom fighters. The officers had seen horrible living conditions in which the colony lived beneath the Portuguese authorities, grew reluctant to fight the colonial wars, and several hundred officers formed the Movimento de Forças Armadas (MFA), which on the 25th of April 1974 carried out bloodless coup, later nicknamed the Revolutionaries of Carnations after Victoria Soldiers struck Conde carnations in their stuck carnations in their rifle barrels and fired and all that. Carnations are still a national symbol of freedom. And despite the coup's popularity, the following year saw unprecedented chaos, and it began where the revolution had begun. In the African colonies, as independence was granted immediately to Guinea-Bissau following the speedy decolonisation of Cape Verde Islands, Sao Tome and Principe, Mozambique and Angola, and the transition wasn't smooth as civil war racked Angola. East Timor, fresh liberated in 1975, was promptly invaded by Indonesia, and within Portugal too, though times were turbulent, and with almost 1 million refugees from the African colonies flooding into Portugal. The country was in another economic mess, and with a widespread strike. In a tangle of political ideas and parties, the communist and radical wing of the MFA launched a revolutionary movement, nationalising firms and services, and peasant farmers seized land to establish communal farms that failed because of infighting and poor management. And while the revolutionaries held sway in the south, the conservative north was led by Mario Soares and his Partido Socialista, Socialist Party, and took a more moderate government formed in 1975 to unite the country after a coup by radical leftists were crushed, and the revolution had finally ended. And Portugal was soon committed to a blend of socialism and democracy, with attempts at government by coalition and non-party candidates, including Portugal's first Prime Minister Maria de Lourdes Pintas Hugo in the 1980s parliamentary elections. Lost where I was. Parliamentary elections, a new political force took at the reins, the conservative Aliança Democrática, AD or Democratic Alliance, led by Francisco Sereno, and after Ferrer's almost immediate death in a plane crash of which evidence of foul play later surfaced, Francisco Pinto Balsemão stepped into his shoes and implemented a plan to join the European Community (EC), and was partly to keep the EC and the International Monetary Fund (IMF) happy that the new coalition government under Soares and Balsemão implemented a strict program on economic monetisation, but not surprisingly, belt tightening wasn't always that popular, and the loudest critics were Soares' right-wing parties in the Partido Social Democrática, PSD or Social Democratic Party, Democrats Party, led by the dynamic Aníbal Cavaco Silva, and communist trade unions also organised strikes, and the appearance of urban terrorism by the radical left-wing Focus Populares de 25 Abril, FP25, deepened unrest, and by mid-1985 the government collapsed. Over labour reforms, farm disagreements, and the PSD emerged a narrow winner in subsequent elections, but this wasn't the end of Soares. In February 1986 presidential elections, the veteran socialist became the country's first civilian head of state in 60 years, and in 1986, after 9 years of negotiations, Portugal joined the EC. Flushed with new funds, it raced ahead of its neighbours with unprecedented economic growth, and the new cash flow also gave Prime Minister Cavaco Silva the power to push ahead with radical economic reforms, and that included labour law reforms that left many disenchanted workers. And in 1980s were crippled by strikes, including one involving 1.5 million workers to no avail. And the controversial legislation was eventually passed, and the PSD, now although stricken by corruption scandals, suffered massive losses during the municipal election but still managed to hold on to power. and the electorate may have been disgusted by scandals, unemployment, inflation, and public sector shortcomings, but they were nonetheless by the PSD promise of growth, and it was obvious that these promises would be hard to fulfill, and in 1992 EC trade barriers fell and Portugal suddenly faced new competitions as fortunes dwindled, as the recession set in and disillusionment grew as Europe's single market revealed the backwardness of Portugal's agricultural sector, as the strikes crippling corruption charges and student demonstrations over rising fees undermined the PSD further, leading to Cavaco Silva's resignation in 1995. And then the general elections in 1995 brought new faces to power, with socialist Antonio Guterres running the show. Despite hopes of a different, less conservative administration, it was business as usual, with Guterres maintaining a budgetary rigour that qualified Portugal for the European and Monetary Union (EMU) in 1998, and for a while Portugal was a star EMU performer with steady economic growth that helped Guterres win a second term, but didn't last, as corruption scandals, as rising inflation and faltering economy soon spelled disaster, and Portugal slipped into an economic stagnation, and there's all sorts of political swing to the centre-left, as Guterres resigning just as his party was squashed in 2002 general election by the PSD. And things were far from rosy for the new Prime Minister, José Manuel Durão Barroso, who had formed a coalition with a former party foe, radically right-wing Centro Democrático Social Partido Popular CDS PP Popular Party. Like his predecessor, Durão had the inevitable job of tackling Portugal's financial and budgetary crisis in hopes of promoting growth and productivity. And under his watch, he faced rising unemployment and stiff rigors of meeting the EU's fiscal requirements. Perhaps given the obstacles, not surprising he would later resign, taking over instead as head of the EC, Portugal's first appointee to the post, and caused a flurry of political shuffling that brought Lisbon Mayor Pedro Santana Lopes to Portugal's top post, and in the international stage, Portugal received some of the worldwide criticism for hosting the Iraq War conference in the Azores in 2003, attended by George Bush, Tony Blair, and Spain's Jose Maria and Aznar. Initially, Portugal contributed a small force to Iraq, but was later withdrawn in 2005, which made then Prime Minister Lopez extremely unpopular at home and ultimately contributed to his political downfall. And meanwhile, in 2004, it was time for Portugal's success as a nation to host European Football Championships, as the refocus of sports did wonders for the country's morale despite its 1-0 loss in the final to Greece. Fortunately, Lopez proved unprepared for the transition of national politics, and by the end of 2004, President Sampaio lost confidence in the Lopez government and dissolved Parliament to call for new elections. As Parliament elections in 2005 brought as well socialist José Sócrates, who models himself on Blair and Spain's José Luis Zapatero, who, still early in his tenure, he sought to reposition the PS as part of the modern shift left, a part of the modern left, one that is more feasibly prudent and committed to the IMF reforms, including pension reforms and privatisation of the public sector services, as continuous topics of many. I've lost where I was again. At the same time, Socrates has tried to stay true to his supporters, wanting to slash unemployment and create jobs. And in 2006, another old face returned to the stage, with the unprecedented election. Cavaco Silva, former PSD Prime Minister. I've lost where I was again. He won, however, he won with just over 50% of the vote. The new government has the same problems to face like ballooning budget deficits, rising unemployment and stagnant growth. In 2004, enlargement of the EU wasn't help, as countries with a much lower labour costs have overturned Portugal's former competitive advantage. And despite its attention to domestic problems, Portugal still continues to play an active role in EU and deepening relations between Europe and Africa, as Portugal has kind of proven to be a driving force in the community of Portuguese-speaking countries and has announced proposals to archive a drastic reduction in poverty among member countries by what should have been 2015. So yeah, that is a lot of history for you. But moving on to language and all. Like the French Italian Romanian is a Romance language derived from Latin, but the pronunciation is quite different from other Romance languages, but similarities are clear when you see in like written forms of it. As the pre-Roman inhabitants to the Iberian Peninsula was responsible for Portuguese's most striking traits, but the influence of Vulgar Latin to Roman merchants and soldiers gradually took over from indigenous languages and caused a strong Neo-Latin charter to evolve. And after the Arab invasion of 711 AD, Arabic became a prestigious cultural language in the peninsula and exerted a strong influence on the Portuguese language, and this connection was significantly weakened when the Moors were expelled in 1249. The Portuguese underwent several changes during the Middle Ages, mostly influenced by French and Provençal, which is another Romance language, and in 16th and 17th centuries, Italian and Spanish were responsible for innovations in the language. So yeah, just a little bit of language. Now it's where can I say end of part 1 as I need to go shopping a lot. So yeah, end of part 1, I'll see you very shortly.